Solomon Islands is a sovereign country consisting of 6 major islands and over 900 smaller islands in Oceania, lying to the east of Papua New Guinea and northwest of Vanuatu, and covering a land area of 28,400 square kilometers. The country's capital, Honiara, is located on the island of Guadalcanal. The country takes its name from the Solomon Islands archipelago, which is a collection of Melanesian islands that also includes the North Solomon Islands, but excludes outlying islands, such as Rennell and Bellona, and the Santa Cruz Islands. The islands have been inhabited for thousands of years. In 1568, the Spanish navigator Álvaro de Mendoza was the first European to visit them, naming them the Isle of Salomon. Britain defined its area of interest in the Solomon Islands archipelago in June 1893, when Captain Gibson R.N. of HMS Curaçao declared the southern Solomon Islands as a British protectorate with the proclamation of the British Solomon Islands Protectorate. During World War II, the Solomon Islands campaign saw fierce fighting between the United States and the Empire of Japan, such as in the Battle of Guadalcanal. The official name of the then British Overseas Territory was changed from the British Solomon Islands Protectorate to Solomon Islands in 1975. Self-government was achieved in 1976. Independence was obtained 2 years later. Today, Solomon Islands is a constitutional monarchy with the Queen of Solomon Islands, currently Queen Elizabeth II, as its head of state. Manasseh Sogavare is the current Prime Minister of Solomon Islands. Name. In 1568, the Spanish navigator Álvaro de Mendoza was the first European to visit the Solomon Islands archipelago, naming it Isle of Salomon after the wealthy biblical King Solomon. It is said that they were given this name in the mistaken assumption that they contained great riches. During most of the period of British rule, the territory was officially named the British Solomon Islands Protectorate. On the 22nd of June 1975, the territory was renamed Solomon Islands. When Solomon Islands became independent in 1978, they retained the name. The definite article "the" is not part of the country's official name, but is sometimes used both within and outside the country. History. Early history. It is believed that Papuan-speaking settlers began to arrive around 30,000 BC. Austronesian speakers arrived c. 4000 BC, also bringing cultural elements such as the outrigger canoe. Between 1200 and 800 BC, the ancestors of the Polynesians, the Lapita people, arrived from the Bismarck archipelago with the characteristic ceramics. European contact. The first European to visit the islands was the Spanish navigator Álvaro de Mendoza, coming from Peru in 1568. The people of Solomon Islands were notorious for headhunting and cannibalism before the arrival of the Europeans. Missionaries began visiting the Solomons in the mid-19th century. They made little progress at first, because blackbirding led to a series of reprisals and massacres. The evils of the labor trade prompted the United Kingdom to declare a protectorate over the southern Solomons in June 1893. In 1898 and 1899, more outlying islands were added to the protectorate. In 1900, the remainder of the archipelago, an area previously under German jurisdiction, was transferred to British administration apart from the islands of Buka and Bougainville, which remained under German administration as part of German New Guinea. Traditional trade and social intercourse between the western Solomon Islands of Mono and Alu and the traditional societies in the south of Bougainville, however, continued without hindrance. Missionaries settled in the Solomons under the protectorate, converting most of the population to Christianity. In the early 20th century, several British and Australian firms began large-scale coconut planting. Economic growth was slow, however. however, and the islanders benefited little. In 1908 the islands were visited by Jack London, who was cruising the Pacific on his boat, the Snark. Second World War. With the outbreak of the Second World War, most planters and traders were evacuated to Australia and most cultivation ceased. Some of the most intense fighting of the war occurred in the Solomons. The most significant of the Allied forces' operations against the Japanese Imperial forces was launched on the 7th of August 1942, with simultaneous naval bombardments and amphibious landings on the Florida Islands at Tulungi and Red Beach on Guadalcanal. The Battle of Guadalcanal became an important and bloody campaign fought in the Pacific War as the Allies began to repulse Japanese expansion. Of strategic importance during the war were the coast watchers operating in remote locations, often on Japanese-held islands, providing early warning and intelligence of Japanese naval, army and aircraft movements during the campaign. Sergeant Major Jacob Vusa was a notable coast watcher who, after capture, refused to divulge Allied information in spite of interrogation and torture by Japanese Imperial forces. He was awarded a Silver Star Medal by the Americans, which is the United States' third highest decoration for valor in combat. Islanders by Ukujiasa and Eroni Kumana were the first to find the shipwrecked John F. Kennedy and his crew of the PT-109. They suggested using a coconut to write a rescue message for delivery by dugout canoe, which was later kept on Kennedy's desk when he became President of the United States. The Solomon Islands was one of the major staging areas of the South Pacific and was home to the famous VMF 214 Black Sheep Squadron commanded by Major Greg "Pappy" Boyington. The slot was a name for New Georgia Sound when it was used by the Tokyo Express to supply the Japanese garrison on Guadalcanal. Of more than 36,000 Japanese on Guadalcanal, about 26,000 were killed or missing, 9,000 died of disease, and 1,000 were captured. Independence. Local councils were established in the 1950s as the islands stabilized from the aftermath of the Second World War. A new constitution was established in 1970 and elections were held. Although the constitution was contested and a new one was created in 1974. In 1973 the first oil price shock occurred, and the increased cost of running a colony became apparent to British administrators. Following the independence of neighbouring Papua New Guinea from Australia in 1975, the Solomon Islands gained self-government in 1976. Independence was granted on the 7th of July 1978. The first Prime Minister was Sir Peter Canaloria, and Solomon Islands retained the monarchy. In September 2012, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge visited the islands to mark the 60th anniversary of the accession of Queen Elizabeth II. Ethnic violence, commonly referred to as the tensions of the ethnic tension. The initial civil unrest was mainly characterized by fighting between the Izatabu Freedom Movement and the Malaita Eagle Force, and Dinnan argue that the ethnic conflict label is an oversimplification. In late 1998, militants on the island of Guadalcanal began a campaign of intimidation and violence towards Malaitan settlers. During the next year, thousands of Malaitans fled back to Malaita, the capital, Honiara. In 1999, the Malaita Eagle Force was established in response. The reformist government of Bartholomew Olifralu struggled to respond to the complexities of this evolving conflict. In late 1999, the government declared a 4-month state of emergency. There were also a number of attempts at reconciliation but to no avail. Alu also requested assistance from Australia and New Zealand in 1999, but his appeal was rejected. In June 2000, Alu was kidnapped by militia members of the MEF who felt that, although he was a Militan, he was not doing enough to protect their interests. Alu subsequently resigned in exchange for his release. Manasseh Sogavare, who had earlier been finance minister in Alu's government but had subsequently joined the opposition, was elected as prime minister by 23 to 21 over Rev. Leslie Bossato. However, Sogavare's election was immediately shrouded in controversy because 6 MPs were unable to attend Parliament for the crucial vote. In October 2000, the Townsville Peace Agreement was signed by the Malaita Eagle Force, elements of the IFM, and the Solomon Islands government. This was closely followed by the Marau Peace Agreement in February 2001, signed by the Marau Eagle Force, the Azatabu Freedom Movement, the Guadalcanal provincial government, and the Solomon Islands government. However, a key Gwali militant leader, Harold KK, refused to sign the agreement, causing a split with the Gwali groups. Subsequently, Gwali signatories to the agreement, led by Andrew Tee, joined with the Mulaitan-dominated police to form the Joint Operations Force. During the next 2 years, the conflict moved to the weather coast of Guadalcanal as the Joint Operations unsuccessfully attempted to capture KK and his group. New elections in December 2001 brought Sir Alan Kemakeza into the Prime Minister's chair with the support of his People's Alliance Party and the Association of Independent Members. Law and order deteriorated as the nature of the conflict shifted. There was continuing violence on the weather coast while militants in Honiara increasingly turned their attention to crime and extortion. The Department of Finance would often be surrounded by armed men when funding was due to arrive. In December 2002, Finance Minister Laurie Chan resigned after being forced at gunpoint to sign a check made out to some of the militants. Conflict also broke out in Western Province between locals and Malaitan settlers. Renegade members of the Bougainville Revolutionary Army were invited in as a protection force but ended up causing as much trouble as they prevented. The prevailing atmosphere of lawlessness, widespread extortion, and ineffective police prompted a formal request by the Solomon Islands government for outside help. With the country bankrupt and the capital in chaos, the request was unanimously supported in Parliament. In July 2003, Australian and Pacific Island police and troops arrived in Solomon Islands under the auspices of the Australian-led Regional Assistance Mission to Solomon Islands. A sizable international security contingent of 2,200 police and troops, led by Australia and New Zealand, and with representatives from about 20 other Pacific nations, began arriving the next month under Operation Help 'em Friend. Since this time, some commentators have considered the country a failed state. However, other academics argue that rather than being a failed state, it is an unformed state, a state that never consolidated even after decades of independence. In April 2006, allegations that the newly elected Prime Minister Snyderini had used bribes from Chinese businessmen to buy the votes of members of parliament led to mass rioting in the capital Honiara. A deep underlying resentment against the minority Chinese business community led to much of Chinatown in the city being destroyed. Tensions were also increased by the belief that large sums of money were being exported to China. China sent chartered aircraft to evacuate hundreds of Chinese who fled to avoid the riots. Evacuation of Australian and British citizens was on a much smaller scale. Additional Australian, New Zealand and Fijian police and troops were dispatched to try to quell the unrest. Rennell eventually resigned before facing a motion of no confidence in Parliament, and Parliament elected Manasseh Sogavare as Prime Minister. Earthquakes on the 2nd of April 2007. Solomon Island were struck by a major earthquake followed by a large tsunami. Initial reports indicated that the tsunami, which mainly affected the small island of Gizo, was several meters high according to some reports, 5 meters according to the Foreign Office. The tsunami was triggered by an 8.0 magnitude earthquake, with a hypocenter 349 kilometers northwest of the island's capital, Honiara, at lat. -8.453 long 156.957 and at a depth of 10 kilometers. According to the United States Geological Survey, the earthquake struck at 20 hours 39 minutes and 56 seconds UTC on Sunday, the 1st of April 2007. Since the initial event and up until 22 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds UTC on Wednesday, the 4th of April 2007, more than 44 aftershocks of a magnitude of 5.0 or greater were recorded in the region. The death toll from the resulting tsunami was at least 52 people, and the tsunami destroyed more than 900 homes and left thousands of people homeless. Land thrust from the quake has extended out from the shoreline of one island, Ranonga, by up to 70 meters according to local residents. This has left many once pristine coral reefs exposed on the newly formed beaches. On February 6, 2013, the Solomon Islands earthquake disaster demolished rows of houses, leaving countless victims unidentified and allegedly deceased. With a magnitude of 8.0, this earthquake activated a tsunami that hit altitudes of up to 1.5 meters. The week leading up to the disaster, there was a sequence of earthquakes documented on the Santa Cruz Islands with a magnitude of 6.0. Politics. Solomon Islands is a constitutional monarchy and has a parliamentary system of government. Queen Elizabeth II is the monarch of the Solomon Islands and the head of state. She is represented by the Governor-General, who is chosen by the Parliament for a 5-year term. There is a unicameral parliament of 50 members, elected for 4-year terms. However, Parliament may be dissolved by majority vote of its members before the completion of its term. Parliamentary representation is based on single-member constituencies. Suffrage is universal for citizens over age 21. The head of government is the Prime Minister, who is elected by Parliament and chooses the cabinet. Each ministry is headed by a cabinet member, who is assisted by a permanent secretary, a career public servant who directs the staff of the ministry. Solomon Islands governments are characterized by weak political parties and highly unstable parliamentary coalitions. They are subject to frequent votes of no confidence, leading to frequent changes in government leadership and cabinet appointments. Land ownership is reserved for Solomon Islanders. The law provides that resident expatriates, such as the Chinese and Kiribati, may obtain citizenship through naturalization. Land generally is still held on a family or village basis and may be handed down from mother or father according to local custom. The islanders are reluctant to provide land for non-traditional economic undertakings, and this has resulted in continual disputes over land ownership. No military forces are maintained by Solomon Islands, although a police force of nearly 500 includes a border protection unit. The police also are responsible for fire service, disaster relief, and maritime surveillance. The police force is headed by a commissioner, appointed by the Governor-General and responsible to the Prime Minister. On the 27th of December 2006, the Solomon Islands government took steps to prevent the country's Australian police chief from returning to the Pacific nation. On 12 January 2007, Australia replaced its top diplomat expelled from Solomon Islands for political interference in a conciliatory move aimed at easing a 4-month dispute between the two countries. On 13 December 2007, Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare was toppled by a vote of no confidence in Parliament, following the defection of 5 ministers to the opposition. It was the first time a prime minister had lost office in this way in Solomon Islands. On 20 December, Parliament elected the opposition's candidate Derek Sekour as prime minister, in a vote of 32 to 15. That the Governor-General appoints the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court on the advice of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. The Governor-General appoints the other justices with the advice of a Judicial Commission. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council serves as the highest appellate court. The current Chief Justice is Sir Albert Palmer. From March 2014, Justice Edwin Goldsborough will serve as the President of the Court of Appeal for Solomon Islands. Justice Goldsborough has previously served a 5-year term as a judge of the High Court of Solomon Islands. Justice Edwin Goldsborough then served as the Chief Justice of the Turks and Caicos Islands. Foreign Relations. Solomon Islands is a member of the United Nations, Commonwealth, Pacific Islands Forum, South Pacific Commission, International Monetary Fund, and the European Union. African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. The political stage of Solomon Islands was influenced by its position regarding the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China. Solomon Islands gave diplomatic recognition to the Republic of China, recognizing it as the sole legitimate government of all of China, thus giving Taiwan vital votes in the United Nations. Lucrative investments, political funding and preferential loans from both the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China have increasingly manipulated the political landscape of the Solomon Islands. Relations with Papua New Guinea, which had become strained because of an influx of refugees from the Bougainville Rebellion and attacks on the northern islands of Solomon Islands, by elements pursuing Bougainvillian rebels, have been repaired. A 1998 peace accord on Bougainville removed the armed threat, and the two nations regularized border operations in a 2004 agreement. Military. Although the locally recruited British Solomon Islands Protectorate Defence Force was part of Allied forces taking part in fighting in the Solomons during the Second World War, the country has not had any regular military forces since independence. The various paramilitary elements of the Royal Solomon Islands Police Force were disbanded and disarmed in 2003 following the intervention of the Regional Assistance Mission to Solomon Islands. RAMSI has a small military detachment headed by an Australian commander with responsibilities for assisting the police element of RAMSI in internal and external security. The RSIPF still operates 2 Pacific-class patrol boats, which constitute the de facto Navy of Solomon Islands. In the long term, it is anticipated that the RSIPF will resume the defense role of the country. The police force is headed by a commissioner, appointed by the Governor-General and responsible to the Minister of Police, National Security and AMP Correctional Services. The police budget of Solomon Islands has been strained due to a 4-year civil war, following Cyclone Zoe's strike on the islands of Tikopia and Vanuatu in December 2002. Australia had to provide the Solomon Islands government with $200,000 for fuel and supplies for the patrol boat Lutta to sail with. Relief supplies. Administrative divisions for local government. The country is divided into 10 administrative areas, of which 9 are provinces administered by elected provincial assemblies, and the 10th is the capital Honiara, administered by the Honiara Town Council. Central, Kwasial, Guadalcanal, Isabel, Makera, Sulawesi, Malaita, Rennell and Bellona, Temo 2, Western, Honiara City. Geography. Solomon Islands is an island nation that lies east of Papua New Guinea and consists of many islands: Quasiel, the Shortland Islands, the New Georgia Islands, Santa Isabel, the Russell Islands, Ngigela, Malaita, Guadalcanal, Sikana, Maramasaik, Ulawa, Yukai, Makira, Santa Ana, Rennell and Bellona, the Santa Cruz Islands, and three remote, tiny outliers: Tikopia, Inuta, and Fatuataka. The country's islands lie between latitudes 5 degrees and 13 degrees south and longitudes 155 degrees and 169 degrees east. The distance between the westernmost and easternmost islands is about 1,500 kilometers. The Santa Cruz Islands are situated north of Vanuatu and are especially isolated at more than 200 kilometers from the other islands. Bougainville is geographically part of the Solomon Islands but politically part of Papua New Guinea. Climate. The island's ocean equatorial climate is extremely humid throughout the year, with a mean temperature of 26.5 degrees Celsius and few extremes of temperature or weather. June through August is the cooler period, though seasons are not pronounced. The northwesterly winds of November through April bring more frequent rainfall and occasional squalls or cyclones. The annual rainfall is about 3,050 millimeters. Ecology. The Solomon Islands archipelago is part of two distinct terrestrial ecoregions. Most of the islands are part of the Solomon Islands rainforests ecoregion, which also includes the islands of Bougainville and Buka. These forests have come under pressure from forestry activities. The Santa Cruz Islands are part of the Vanuatu rainforests ecoregion, together with the neighboring archipelago of Vanuatu. Soil quality ranges from extremely rich volcanic to relatively infertile limestone. More than 230 varieties of orchids and other tropical flowers brighten the landscape. The islands contain several active and dormant volcanoes. The Tinakula and Kavachi volcanoes are the most active. Economy. Solomon Islands per capita GDP of $600 ranks it as a lesser developed nation, and more than 75% of its labor force is engaged in subsistence and fishing. Most manufactured goods and petroleum products must be imported. Until 1998, when world prices for tropical timber fell steeply, timber was Solomon Islands' main export product, and, in recent years, Solomon Islands forests were dangerously overexploited. Other important cash crops and exports include copper and palm oil. In 1998, gold mining began at Gold Ridge on Guadalcanal. Minerals exploration in other areas continued. In the wake of the ethnic violence in June 2000, exports of palm oil and gold ceased while exports of timber fell. The islands are rich in undeveloped mineral resources such as lead, zinc, nickel, and gold. Solomon Islands fisheries also offer prospects for export and domestic economic expansion. A Japanese joint venture, Solomon Taiyo Limited, which operated the only fish cannery in the country, closed in mid-2000 as a result of the ethnic disturbances. Though the plant has reopened under local management, the export of tuna has not resumed. Negotiations are underway that may lead to the eventual reopening of the Goldridge mine and the major oil palm plantation. Tourism, particularly diving, is an important service industry for Solomon Islands. Tourism growth is hampered by lack of infrastructure and transportation limitations. Solomon Islands government was insolvent by 2002. Since the RAMSI intervention in 2003, the government has recast its budget. It has consolidated and renegotiated its domestic debt and, with Australian backing, is now seeking to renegotiate its foreign obligations. Principal aid donors are Australia, New Zealand, the European Union, Japan, and the Republic of China. Recently, Solomon Islands courts have reapproved the export of live dolphins for profit, most recently to Dubai, United Arab Emirates. This practice was originally stopped by the government in 2004 after international uproar over a shipment of 28 live dolphins to Mexico. The move resulted in criticism from both Australia and New Zealand, as well as several conservation organizations. Energy. A team of renewable energy developers working for the South Pacific Applied Geoscience Commission and funded by the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnership, have developed a scheme that allows local communities to access renewable energy, such as solar, water and wind power, without the need to raise substantial sums of cash. Under the scheme, islanders who are unable to pay for solar lanterns in cash may pay instead in kind with crops,